Why did they still call her a disgrace? 3 years had passed, yet the word still clung to Morgan Viper Sullivan like the bitter smoke of a fire long extinguished. Disgrace. A liability. A Marine sniper who had followed orders too well and for that lost everything. She had buried the uniform, the medals, the loyalty. What remained was silence in the Montana mountains, a silence that judged her less than any tribunal ever could. But silence has a way of being broken. Snow had fallen before dawn, dusting the peaks in glassy shards of white. Morgan stood on her porch, coffee steaming in her hand, scanning the valley below as if instinct alone might reveal the threat she could never name. She told herself she was done with wars, done with commands barked over radios, done with taking lives for missions that were never hers to begin with. And yet, the rifle leaned against the wall, always there, always within reach. She was 29, her hair longer now, auburn strands whipping free in the mountain wind. Her face had hardened, angles sharpened by the cold air of exile. This wasn't the face of the Marine Corps, rising star. It was the face of someone learning how to live stripped of purpose, haunted by a single bullet that had ended more than one life. "Coffee's still hot if you want some," she called down when a figure moved from the tree line below. Arthur Fitzgerald climbed the last few steps of the slope, steady despite his limp. 68 years old, weathered by scars and shadows he didn't care to explain. Retired Army Ranger. Neighbor. The closest thing Morgan allowed herself to have as a friend. He accepted the mug she offered, sipping without a word at first. That was their rhythm, silence before meaning. Then almost casually he said, "Heard helicopters an hour ago, northeast, Devil's Backbone Valley." Her body stiffened before her mind caught up. Instinct, the curse that never left. Military birds, multiple aircraft, not training, not here, not in this weather, something serious. She tried to shrug it off, but Art noticed the shift in her shoulders, the way her jaw set. "Unusual flight pattern," he said, as if confirming what she already knew. They sipped coffee in silence, snow thickening, air thin and sharp. Neither asked questions the other wasn't ready to answer. But then Art broke it. "You ever miss it?" Morgan's eyes went to the rifle leaning against the wall. A pause. Then, softly, "I miss the certainty, knowing what the mission was, what success looked like, who you could trust to watch your back." Her voice faltered. "But not the politics, not the lies." She didn't finish the thought because she didn't have to. He understood. The mission that had destroyed her, the one that never officially existed, came back in flashes she couldn't silence. A target marked high value. One shot. One kill. Easy. Except the target was a CIA asset, his identity hidden. Morgan had followed orders. Command had been kept blind. And when the truth unraveled, she was the perfect scapegoat. They stripped her rank, her honor, her future, left her a ghost. Sometimes, late at night, she imagined ways she could have done it differently, but every scenario ended the same. She was meant to fail, meant to fall, and she had. "Question is," Art said, "what are you running toward, or what are you running from?" The answer never came because the satellite phone inside her cabin began to ring. A tone so sharp, so unmistakable, her heart thudded before she even reached the door. She had given that number to exactly 3 people. Art, her old team medic, and Colonel Jennifer Westbrook, the officer who had signed her discharge papers with regret in her eyes. Morgan grabbed the phone, already bracing. "Sullivan." "Morgan, it's Westbrook." The voice was tight, urgent. "There's a situation, and I need you to listen carefully." Morgan's pulse surged, not from fear, from recognition. That voice, that tone, it meant lives were slipping and the clock was ticking. "A SEAL team," Westbrook continued, "conducting classified ops in Devil's Backbone, walked into a coordinated ambush. Large force, heavily armed, over 150 fighters. The team surrounded, heavy casualties." Morgan shut her eyes. The image formed instantly. 24 operators cornered, pressed against stone, ammunition bleeding away. She didn't need maps. She knew the valley like she knew her own scars. The mining complex there was a death trap. "How many hours until support?" she asked. "Earliest reinforcements, 12 hours. Air support grounded until dawn." "How many SEALs?" 24. "They won't last 6 hours, not without help." The silence stretched, heavy as stone. Morgan looked at the rifle on the porch, at the mountains that had held her in exile. 3 years of hiding from betrayal. And now, those mountains had trapped 24 men whose lives depended on someone who no longer officially existed. "You know my status," Morgan said flatly. "If I fire a single shot, I'll be operating outside sanction. No protection, no backup." "I know," Westbrook's voice softened. "And I can't order you. This is voluntary, but Morgan, you're the only one left." Through the window, Art's eyes met hers, patient, knowing. The rifle caught the dawn light like it, too, was waiting. Morgan breathed once, long and steady. Then, "Send me the grid. Send everything you've got. I'll move within the hour." She set the phone down. The decision had been made before she'd spoken. Art didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't question. He just stood there, the snow thickening around them. "Guess that answers what direction you're headed," he murmured. Morgan turned, began gathering her gear. Not quickly, deliberately. The motions came back like muscle memory, as if 3 years had been a blink. Rifle cleaned, ammunition counted, rangefinder, night scope, trauma plates, 63 pounds total, manageable. The satellite buzzed again, flashing images, coordinates, intel packages. She read them all, her eyes hardening with each line. Harrison the Snake Mansfield, international arms dealer. A man who had survived for 15 years by knowing American tactics better than Americans themselves. His men weren't rabble. They were trained. Former special forces from across the world. Russians, Brits, Germans, ghosts like her. The SEALs never had a chance. Unless she could change the math. Art leaned against the doorway, watching her pack the Barrett M82A1 into its case. "You sure about this?" "No," Morgan said, pulling her jacket tight. "But those men didn't choose this. Someone chose it for them." The cold cut her skin as she stepped outside, each breath visible, each step deliberate. She started down the slope, rifle slung like an old partner, and whispered to herself, "Time to find out if 3 years in exile taught me anything." Behind her, the cabin faded into the white blur. Ahead, Devil's Backbone Valley waited. And in that valley, 24 men clung to hope they didn't know was already moving toward them. How far could a body push against betrayal before it broke? Morgan asked herself that with every step across the snow. The path she had chosen wasn't the kind most people could survive. 3 hours of climbing in freezing wind, each step carrying 63 pounds of steel and memory. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she never slowed. She couldn't. The radio on her chest crackled faintly, distorted by storm and distance. A young voice strained. "Bravo team, we need covering fire for casualty evacuation." Then static. Then silence. She forced herself not to imagine the faces of the men behind that voice. If she let it in too deeply, it would paralyze her. She adjusted the straps on her pack, kept moving. The snow fell heavier, blinding, swallowing the world into white. Most people would call this a storm. To her, it was cover. Her boots found purchase on ice-slick granite, each handhold tested before she committed her weight. The Barrett shifted against her back, changing her balance, reminding her of its power and its demand for perfection. One mistake here wasn't just a fall. It was 24 funerals. She had mapped these routes during her exile, never imagining she'd use them for war. Countless hikes, countless climbs, carving the terrain into her memory. Back then, it was therapy. Now it was survival. Halfway up a ridge, she froze. Voices, not on the radio, carried faintly through the storm. English, clipped, professional, military, too disciplined for mercenaries, enemy operators. She pressed herself against the rock, listening. "Keep pressure on building 2. Don't let them regroup." Snipers hold positions, they'll break soon. Her jaw tightened. Whoever these men were, they weren't random fighters. They were trained like her, maybe trained better. Mansfield hadn't brought thugs to Devil's Backbone. He had built an army of ghosts. Morgan resumed her climb, slower now, every movement deliberate. She couldn't risk discovery before she reached firing ground. The storm worsened. Visibility dropped to 30 yards. Her breath came in ragged bursts, each exhale forming a cloud of frost that stung her lips. Still, she pressed forward, and finally the ground leveled. She crouched behind a cluster of boulders. From here, the valley spread out below, or what little of it she could see through the snow. She unfolded her tripod, assembled the Barrett with practiced ease, and pressed her cheek to the cold stock. Through the scope the world sharpened. Muzzle flashes blinked from ridgelines like fireflies. The mining complex lay in ruins, walls pocked by heavy fire. Inside, shadows moved, men crouched low, weapons braced, waiting for the storm to pass. Morgan whispered almost unconsciously, "Hold on, boys." She adjusted for wind, for distance. Her scope picked out the machine gun nest on Ridgeline Alpha. The gunners fired in controlled bursts, sweeping the SEALs' cover with disciplined precision. Whoever was up there had done this before, and they were killing men one by one. Her breathing slowed, in out, in out. Finger on trigger, gentle pressure. The rifle thundered, recoil slamming into her shoulder. She didn't blink. Through the scope she saw the machine gunner drop. His weapon fell silent. For a heartbeat the valley seemed to pause. Then chaos. Enemy voices erupted, radio chatter spiking. Muzzles turned toward the ridgeline. Fire raked the rocks where she'd been, but she was already gone, dragging her pack, moving low across the snow. Never fire twice from the same place, not against men like these. "Control, this is Viper," she whispered into her radio. "First target eliminated. SEAL team should move now while they're adjusting." Below, Lieutenant Commander Cole Razor Peterson didn't hesitate. He raised his hand, signaling, "Execute breakout." 17 men sprinted into the storm, wounded carried on shoulders, weapons spitting what little ammo they had left. Covering fire burst from their rifles, desperate and thin. Morgan dropped prone in a new position, found her second target, a sniper nest overlooking the escape route. She didn't aim for the shooter. She aimed for the platform's support beam. The shot cracked, splintered wood, and sent 2 enemy marksmen tumbling 40 feet into stone. "Enemy platform down," she transmitted. The SEALs surged forward, shadows in snow. For the first time all night, momentum shifted. But it wouldn't last. High above, Captain Peter Lockwood adjusted his binoculars. Former Force Recon, once an American brother-in-arms, now Mansfield's right hand. He studied the ridgeline, calculating. "Sniper," he muttered, "professional, extreme range, mobile." His voice hardened. "All teams, priority target is the hostile marksman. Eliminate at once." Morgan knew it was coming before the first counter-sniper round hissed past her ear. She rolled, snow exploding where she'd been. Another shot cracked stone inches from her boot. They were close, too close. She crawled to cover, heart pounding but steady. Fear wasn't new. She had lived in its company long enough to know its weight. What mattered was control, breath, movement, patience. She relocated again, deeper into cover. Through her scope, she picked out her third target, a forward observer with a radio directing enemy fire. He moved with discipline, exposing himself only in slivers. Morgan exhaled, calculated, squeezed. The round hit, his body dropped, and just like that, enemy coordination faltered. Their fire scattered, unorganized, buying the SEALs precious minutes. "Forward observer down," she reported. Peterson's reply was raw gratitude disguised as professionalism. "Copy, Viper. Outstanding work. Can you stay with us?" "I'll stay," she said, already crawling toward her next hide. "But windows closing, make it count." Minutes later, the SEALs regrouped in the equipment yard. Men collapsed behind broken machinery, gasping, bleeding, clinging to life. Peterson scanned them quickly. Too many wounded, too little ammo, and no way out. "Unknown friendly sniper," he radioed. "Whoever you are, we owe you our lives." Morgan didn't answer. She couldn't. She wasn't doing this for gratitude, not for redemption. She was doing it because she knew what it felt like to be abandoned, to be left in a valley with no way out, betrayed by those who should have protected you. And she wasn't about to let it happen again. Above her, snow whipped harder, wind howled louder. Enemy teams spread across the ridges, hunting. She could hear their boots crunching on ice, their radios crackling in foreign tongues. Russian, German, English, all trained, all coming for her. She adjusted her pack, crawled into a narrow crevice barely wide enough for her rifle. The storm shielded her heat signature. She became part of the mountain, silent, waiting. Her next target moved into view, a runner carrying ammunition boxes to a firing line. She tracked him, finger tightening. Fired. The bullet hit, detonating the crates. Flames and chaos erupted, screams carried on the wind. Enemy fire stuttered. The SEALs looked up, eyes wide at the explosion. Peterson muttered to his chief, "That woman is saving our lives." But Morgan didn't hear him. She was already moving again, cold biting her face, muscles burning, heart steady. For the first time in 3 years, she felt something close to certainty. She had a mission, and this time she wouldn't fail. How long could men fight when every bullet felt like their last? In the equipment yard, Lieutenant Commander Cole Peterson knelt in the snow beside his wounded. His gloves were slick with blood, his radio choked with static, his heart hammering against the thin wall between resolve and despair. 15 years of missions, 7 countries, endless firefights, none had ever felt this helpless. They were SEALs. They weren't supposed to beg for rescue. But even SEALs ran out of ammunition, and even SEALs bled out. Razor, Chief Petty Officer Sam Clark, crouched beside him, voice low but steady. "Bravo's down to 40 rounds per man. Charlie says 20 minutes before they're dry." Peterson closed his eyes for a second. 20 minutes, that was all. He forced himself not to look at Mitchell, barely conscious, or Campbell, whose breath rattled with each shallow gasp. They'd already lost Rodriguez. Castellano, too, men who'd survived everything but this. The radio crackled, a faint voice cutting through the storm. "SEAL 7, this is Viper. Enemy resupply disrupted. Ammunition destroyed. You have a window, use it." Peterson's lips tightened. Whoever she was, wherever she was, she had already killed 4 positions that should have buried them alive. A ghost in the storm, changing the math with every shot. He couldn't waste that gift. "Copy, Viper," he said. "We'll push while they're uncoordinated." Above them, Morgan adjusted her scope, her eye aching from strain. Snowflakes streaked across the glass, distorting her vision, but she blinked them away. Each shot had to matter. She couldn't afford wasted rounds, not when she had only 47 in her pack. She listened, always listening. Enemy radios scrambled, boots crunched on ice. She could hear the search patterns tightening. They were closing on her, narrowing the noose. She shifted deeper into her hide, pressing herself against frozen rock. And for a moment, she let herself feel the weight. The men in the valley were fighting for survival. She was fighting for something else. Not redemption, she'd long since given up on that, but maybe something quieter, to prove to herself that she hadn't been wrong all along, that the instincts, the discipline, the sacrifices, they still meant something, that the bullet that had ended her career didn't have to end her soul. A faint whistle cut through the storm. She stilled. That sound, she knew it, incoming sniper fire. The round slammed into the stone inches from her shoulder, spraying her with rock fragments. Another hit the snow by her boot. They had her bracketed. She didn't panic. Panic got you killed. She slid backward, dragging the Barrett, belly to the ground. Another shot cracked against the cave mouth she had just vacated. "Control," she whispered into her mic. This is Viper, counter-snipers in play, multiple trained. Colonel Westbrook's voice came back strained. Be advised, Morgan satellite intel shows additional enemy reinforcements moving from the northeast. 20 to 30 hostiles with vehicle support. They're not letting that SEAL team leave alive. Morgan clenched her jaw. Reinforcements, trucks, more men than she could possibly hold off alone. She wanted to curse, but she bit it back. Instead, she focused. Copy, control, I'll adapt. Adaptation, that was survival, that was all she had. She crawled through a fissure in the rock, emerged into a higher perch. Through her scope, she caught sight of one of her hunters. Russian. Spetsnaz, by the way he moved, patient, methodical, breathing in rhythm with his scope. He was good, very good. But he didn't know this terrain. Morgan held her breath, waited. The storm gusted, snow veiling his figure for a second. That was all she needed. Her shot cracked, echoed, and when the gust cleared, his body was still. One down, she whispered to herself. But more would come, always more. In the yard below, Petty Officer Ian Fresh Palmer fired his last magazine in short, controlled bursts. He was 23, barely out of Bud S, and already he'd lived longer than he thought possible tonight. His rifle clicked empty. He cursed, drew his sidearm. Fresh, Chief Clark barked, tossing him a half-spent mag. Make it last. Palmer slammed it in, nodded. His hands shook, but his eyes stayed steady. Fear was there, but so was something stronger, defiance. Above, Morgan scanned for her next target. She saw the communications operator on the ridge, coordinating the counter-sniper teams hunting her. He ducked low, exposing himself only when speaking. A sliver of a target, impossible for most. But she wasn't most. Her breath slowed, finger eased, the Barrett roared. The operator jerked and collapsed. Enemy chatter collapsed into chaos. SEAL 7, this is Viper, she transmitted. Enemy comms disrupted. They'll scatter for a few minutes. Move now. Peterson didn't hesitate. He rallied his men, dragging the wounded, shouting over the storm. They surged again, every step a gamble, every yard paid in blood. Above them, Captain Lockwood watched through his binoculars, his jaw tightening. Mansfield's millions, 18 months of planning, elite mercenaries from 6 nations, all unraveling because of one sniper he hadn't accounted for. Protocol 7, Mansfield's voice growled over the radio. Commit everything, eliminate her, then finish the Americans. Lockwood's eyes narrowed. Protocol 7 meant total war. Every resource, every man focused on one thing, her. Morgan felt it before she heard it, the shift in the valley. The enemy's fire pattern changed. Less on the SEALs, more sweeping arcs across the ridges. They were coming for her with everything. Her radio crackled, Peterson's voice hoarse but firm. Viper, they're hunting you. She smiled bitterly to herself. They'll have to find me first. She crawled deeper into her cave hide, pressing against the granite, listening as boots and voices drew nearer. She could hear them, 3, maybe 4 operators. Close, too close. One wrong sound, and they'd have her. Her finger rested on the trigger, her breath silent. She thought of Art back at the cabin, his question echoing, "What are you running from?" Maybe this was the answer. Maybe she wasn't running anymore. The first shadow passed her sightline. She squeezed. The body dropped without a sound. The others shouted, firing blind into the cave. She rolled, dragging the Barrett stone chip slicing her cheek. She fired again, another down. The third rushed in, too fast to aim. She drew her sidearm, one clean shot through the throat. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. Her chest heaved. She wiped blood, her own shallow cuts, from her cheek. Listened again, more boots, more voices, they weren't stopping. She keyed her mic. SEAL 7, this is Viper. They're throwing everything at me. You need to hit them now while they're off balance. Peterson's reply came through static, raw with desperation. Copy, Viper. We're preparing final assault. Either we break them now or we don't walk out. Morgan closed her eyes for a beat. then opened them. Her scope found the valley again. Through snow, through fire she searched, and there in the chaos a figure directing everything, Mansfield himself. Her heart slowed, her breath steadied, the mission narrowed to a single point. One man, one shot, changed the war. What would a single bullet mean if it could turn an entire war? Morgan's scope framed Harrison, the snake Mansfield in fleeting glimpses through the storm. He stood outside the reinforced bunker, barking orders into a radio, his voice commanding even over the crack of gunfire. His posture was confident, almost arrogant, a man who had survived too many hunts to believe one shot could end him. Range 1,634 meters, wind unpredictable, visibility fractured, exposure time less than 5 seconds at a stretch. Impossible odds. But impossible odds had defined her life. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to math and motion, finger against trigger, a heartbeat's worth of pressure. The Barrett roared, thunder rolling across the valley. Through her scope, she saw Mansfield jerk backward, hand clawing at his chest before he collapsed into the snow. For a moment the valley froze. Enemy chatter spiked into chaos, shouts overlapping, confused, broken. Coordination fractured. The snake's head was gone. Morgan didn't celebrate. She didn't allow herself the luxury. Already, she was moving, dragging the Barrett deeper into her hide, anticipating the avalanche of fury that would follow. Killing Mansfield was victory and death sentence all at once. "Seal 7, this is Viper," she whispered into her mic. "Primary target eliminated. Enemy command disrupted. Move now. This is your chance." Down below, Lieutenant Commander Peterson's hand tightened on his rifle. Relief warred with urgency. "Copy, Viper. All teams execute assault in 30 seconds. This is our only window." He looked around at his men, bleeding, exhausted, ammunition thin, but their eyes held fire again. Hope, fragile but alive. He knew they weren't fighting just for survival anymore. They were fighting because someone out there had reminded them they weren't alone. "On my mark," Peterson growled. "Alpha with me. Bravo covering fire, Charlie flank left, nobody hesitates." The SEALs surged. Warren's demolition charges detonated, ripping through the mining complex's supports. Concrete crumbled, steel screamed, fireballs lit the valley in flashes of orange against white snow. The night turned to chaos, enemy fighters stumbling, blinded, cut off from orders that no longer came. Morgan's scope tracked the movement, calculating, prioritizing. She picked off a heavy weapons crew setting up an RPG, her shot igniting the warhead in a fireball that consumed the gunners. She shifted, found another target, a sniper breaking for higher ground. One round, clean, final. Her radio crackled with Peterson's voice, ragged but strong. "Viper, keep them busy. We're pushing their center." "Copy," she whispered, already scanning. But even as she struck, she could hear it, the counterstroke. Mansfield's death hadn't ended them. His lieutenants had taken control, shouting orders in Russian, German, Arabic. Professional voices. Men who knew chaos could be harnessed. And now they were coming for her. Boots crunched closer. Voices barked commands. One of them, a cold Russian accent, called her an Amerikanskaya suka, American bitch. The words carried not just hatred but recognition, respect twisted into venom. Morgan wiped snow from her scope, shifted deeper into the cave. Her eyes burned from strain, her hands numb from cold, but she held steady. She had been hunted before by bureaucracy, by betrayal. This was no different. Stay mobile, stay patient, outthink them. Below, the SEALs pushed hard. Fresh Palmer ran beside Clark, firing in bursts, moving cover to cover. His chest heaved, his mind screamed, but his feet didn't stop. Around him, brothers fell, men he'd trained with, laughed with, trusted with his life. He wanted to stop for each of them, but Peterson's voice drove them forward. "Nobody gets left behind." Petty Officer Jake Frost Mitchell stumbled, blood soaking through field dressings, his legs barely carrying him. Porter half dragged him, half carried him, teeth clenched, refusing to let go. "Stay with me, Jake. Just stay with me," Porter gasped. "I'm not quitting," Mitchell forced out, rifle still in his hands, eyes blazing even through the haze of blood loss. "Not while you're still standing." Morgan's scope caught sight of them for a heartbeat, wounded, carried by brothers, men refusing to break. Something inside her chest twisted. She remembered carrying her own teammate once years ago, under fire in a desert no one remembered. He hadn't made it. She had never forgiven herself. Her jaw set, "Not tonight." Her next shot cracked, dropping an enemy about to flank Mitchell and Porter. Another fired, taking out a machine gun nest that had zeroed on Bravo team. Every round bought seconds. Every second bought lives. But seconds ran out fast. In the ridgeline above her, Dmitry Blade Klov moved into position. Former Spetsnaz. 12 years of hunting, nay, snipers across mountains and cities alike. His scope scanned the caves, his mind patient, methodical. He had already narrowed her position by triangulation. Now he waited. Morgan felt him before she saw him. A prickle at the back of her neck, the instinct of prey aware of predator. She shifted slightly, scope panning, and caught the faintest reflection of glass in snow, a rival's eye. Their barrels aligned in the same breath. Two ghosts staring at each other through scopes. Time slowed. Both breathed in rhythm, both fingers tense against triggers. Who would break first? Morgan remembered Art's words. Anger's useful fuel but terrible navigation. She let the anger go, focused on calm, on the mission, on the men below who still needed her. She fired. The recoil slammed her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw Klov jerk back, his rifle clattering onto stone. His body crumpled, lifeless against the ridge. Her lungs finally released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. One hunter down, others still out there. But she was alive, and the valley was still hers. In the yard, Peterson's voice tore through the chaos. "Push, push now, they're breaking." The SEALs roared, surging through rubble, fire reflecting in their eyes. For the first time all night, the enemy faltered, their lines bending under American steel and will. Morgan tracked them through her scope, covering, killing, calculating. She knew it wasn't over. Reinforcements were still coming. More enemies, more guns, more fire. But for the first time in years, she felt clarity. This wasn't about redemption, or politics, or proving herself to anyone. This was about 24 men in a valley of death, and whether they would see the dawn. And she would not let them fall. How long could victory last before the cost came due? The explosion still echoed in the valley, the fire from Mansfield's bunker painting the snow with orange light. For one heartbeat, it felt like the fight had shifted, as if 24 men, battered and bleeding, might actually survive. But survival was never that simple. Morgan shifted in her hide, scope scanning the chaos below. Mansfield's lieutenants hadn't fled. They had adapted. Russian commands cut through the storm, followed by German and Arabic. Enemy fighters rallied around new leaders, digging in with brutal efficiency. Professional killers. They weren't just surviving, they were reorganizing. "SEAL 7, this is Viper," she whispered into her mic. "Target neutralized but secondary commands active. You've got 5 minutes, maybe less, before they reestablish control. Move your wounded." "Copy," Peterson rasped back. His voice carried grit but no illusion. "We'll push east. Extraction's still 12 hours out. Can you cover?" Morgan adjusted her cheek against the frozen stock. Her body screamed from cold and strain, but her voice was steady. "I'll cover." And she meant it. Every step, every bullet, every breath, until she had nothing left. The SEALs began their desperate push, dragging their wounded across rubble and blood-streaked snow. Mitchell, pale and fatting, refused to be carried without his rifle. Palmer clutched his last mag like it was gold. Clark moved like stone, steady even as his shoulders bled through 2 bandages. Each of them was breaking, but none of them broke. Morgan's scope found the first threat, a flanking team moving through shattered machinery, preparing to cut the seals off. She squeezed, one fell. Shifted, fired again, another dropped. A third hesitated, dove for cover, then froze as her final shot found his neck. The Barrett thundered, but to her it was silence, a rhythm she had lived for too long to forget. Her radio crackled with Peterson's voice. "Damn fine work, Viper. Keep those eyes on us." She didn't answer. There wasn't time for pride, only math. Distance, wind, cover, angles. One mistake and men would die. Above her, shadows moved on the ridgeline. More hunters. She could feel them tightening the net. They knew she wasn't just another rifle, she was the ghost bleeding them dry. And they wanted her gone more than they wanted the seals dead. For the first time, she let herself think it plainly. They're going to kill me here. Not from fear, from clarity. And maybe that was all right. Because for once, her death might mean something clean. She wiped frost from her scope, shifted position again. Every crawl through snow burned her lungs. Every drag of the Barrett carved her muscles raw. Still she moved. Still she fired. Below, Peterson ordered another surge. Bravo team leapt a barricade, bullets slicing past them. One struck Petty Officer Darren Lowe square in the chest. He hit the snow hard, gasping, clutching his vest. "Medic," Clark shouted, sliding to his side. He ripped open Lowe's plate carrier. The round had punched through ceramic, tearing deep. Blood welled, too much, too fast. Lowe's eyes found Clark's, wide and terrified. "Tell my kid," he whispered. His voice broke. Clark pressed harder. "Shut up, Darren, you'll tell him yourself." But Morgan could see it through her scope. Lowe was fatting. She couldn't save him with a bullet. No one could. Her chest tightened. She steadied her aim anyway, firing on the squad trying to overrun the medic. One went down, then another. Her shots bought seconds that weren't enough. Lowe's breath stopped, his chest stilled. Clark closed his eyes for half a beat, then lifted his rifle again. No time for grief. Not here, not yet. Morgan exhaled slowly, her scope blurring for a moment. She had killed countless men, most of them strangers, all of them enemies. But watching an ally fall, one she couldn't save, tore at something deeper. This was why she had left, why she had buried herself in mountains and silence. Not because she couldn't fight, but because she couldn't keep burying the one she fought beside. She shook it off, steadied her hands. Focus. If she wavered now, more would fall. Her scope found another target, an enemy sniper relocating, quick and efficient. She fired, dropped him. Another moved to set up an RPG. Her shot lit the launcher, engulfing him in flame. "Seal 7 Viper," she reported. "North approach clear for 60 seconds, move fast." "Copy," Peterson snapped, waving his men forward. His heart was heavy, but his voice was iron. "We've still got 15 on their feet. 15 is enough." They pushed harder, dragging bodies, carrying brothers, not leaving anyone behind, alive or not. But the valley wasn't letting them go easy. A convoy appeared through the storm, headlights cutting the snow. Trucks, technicals with mounted guns, reinforcements. The roar of engines carried over the ridge like thunder. Morgan's stomach dropped. Too many, too fast. She adjusted her scope, targeted the lead truck, fired. The windshield shattered, driver slumped. The vehicle skidded sideways and jackknifed, blocking the trail. Chaos rippled through the convoy as the following trucks swerved, colliding in sprays of snow and steel. But not all stopped. 2 technicals broke free, machine guns spitting fire. Peterson's men hit the ground, returning what little they had left. The storm turned into hellfire again. "Seal 7 Viper," Morgan hissed into her mic. "Hold your ground, I'll take the guns." She fired once, a gunner folded backward. Shifted, fired again, another fell. The second truck swerved, guns swinging wildly. Morgan fired through the driver's side window, the truck lurched, lost control and flipped, crashing into a gorge. For a moment, silence again, only the howl of wind and the groans of the wounded. Peterson looked at his men, bruised, bleeding, exhausted. He could see the truth in their eyes. Some of them were already dead on their feet, and still they moved, because someone above them refused to quit. "Who the hell is she?" Palmer muttered under his breath, awe and disbelief mixing in his voice. Clark answered without looking up. "Doesn't matter. She's the reason we're still breathing." Above, Morgan slumped against the stone for half a heartbeat, her chest heaving. Sweat froze against her skin, her muscles screaming. She had already fired more rounds in one night than she had in the last 3 years combined. Every shot drained her. Every shot mattered. And still the storm raged. Still the boots closed in. She whispered to herself, a mantra more than a prayer. Not one more falls. Her hands trembled as she loaded another mag. And then she moved again. What broke first, the body, or the will that kept it moving? Morgan wasn't sure anymore. Her body screamed with every crawl, her lungs clawed for air in the thin, freezing storm. Her gloves were soaked through, her knuckles raw, her cheek cut from flying stone. She tasted blood, felt it freeze on her lips, but her finger stayed steady against the trigger. Below, the SEALs stumbled east through the shattered mining yard, every step of victory, every yard bought with pain. Peterson carried a wounded man over his shoulder. Clark guided the staggered line. Palmer fired his last sidearm rounds in bursts meant more to buy time than to kill. They looked less like a unit now, and more like survivors clawing against the inevitable. And yet they moved, because Morgan's bullets carved them a path. Through her scope she saw the trail ahead. The storm whipped snow so thick it seemed like walls. But she knew the terrain, Devil's Backbone, wasn't just rock and ice. It was memory carved into her bones from exile. If they could reach the ravine to the east, narrow enough to bottleneck attackers, they might hold until dawn. But the enemy wasn't letting go. Not now, not after Mansfield. "SEAL 7, this is Viper," she whispered, voice raw. "East Ravine is your best chance, but they're moving to cut you off. I'll slow them." "Copy," Peterson answered. His voice had no hesitation, only urgency. "We'll move, do what you can." She already was. Her scope locked on 3 figures moving across a ridge, disciplined, low, coordinated. European operators. She fired once, twice, 3 times. Each round found its mark. Each body dropped silently into snow. But for each she killed, 5 more seemed to take their place. The valley was alive with movement now, enemy boots pounding against stone, radios barking in a dozen languages. She couldn't kill them all. She wasn't even sure she could survive another hour. And yet she stayed. Because down below, men kept fighting. Men who should have been dead an hour ago but still pushed forward, bleeding, limping, refusing to quit. Men she didn't even know who didn't even know her. But they mattered. Snow gusted hard, blanking her scope. She blinked against the ice, waiting for a gap, and when it came, her heart lurched. A squad had broken through. 10 men closing on the SEALs' rear, too close, too fast. Morgan didn't think. She moved, rolled from her perch, slid down the rock face, half crawling, half falling until she found another line of sight. She shouldered the Barrett again, ignoring the bruise forming deep in her muscle. Fired. One went down, fired again. Another, but the rest scattered, firing up toward her. Rounds sparked against stone. One chipped rock into her face, tearing a line across her temple. Warm blood streaked into her eye. She blinked hard, kept her scope steady. Fired again. The squad faltered. "Rear threat neutralized," she hissed into her mic. Peterson's reply was ragged but grateful. "Copy, we're still moving." Still moving, but barely. Clark dragged another man, his own legs trembling but his grip unbreakable. Palmer stumbled, dropped to one knee, fired his pistol until the slide locked back, then pushed to his feet again. Peterson's voice kept them going, but each word sounded heavier, harder. The storm raged louder, drowning out screams, gunfire, even thought. The valley was becoming something primal, a place where only will determine survival. Morgan crawled to a new perch, vision blurring. She pressed her glove against her temple wound, pulled it away slick with red. She didn't have time to patch it, didn't have time for anything but the mission. Through her scope, she found another machine gun nest hammering the SEAL's path. She lined up, exhaled, fired. The gunner dropped, his weapon silenced. But this time the recoil hit wrong. Her shoulder jolted, pain flaring white-hot. She gasped, teeth clenched, nearly lost her grip on the Barrett. Her body was failing. She forced herself still, steadied her breathing, ignored the screaming in her muscles. One more shot, always one more. She fired again. And again. Every round was a piece of her she would never get back. Above, new headlights cut through the storm. More trucks, more men. The enemy wasn't breaking, they were swelling. A tide against a handful of survivors. For the first time, a flicker of doubt clawed into her chest. What if I can't hold them? What if this valley swallows all of us? She crushed the thought before it could grow. Doubt was a luxury. Instead, she whispered into the storm as if the mountains themselves might hear. Not tonight, not one more. Her radio hissed again. Peterson's voice came through, harsh but steady. Viper, we see the ravine. We're almost there. Hold them just a little longer. Morgan's lips tightened into something between a smile and a grimace. A little longer, always a little longer. She chambered another round, took aim at the headlights, fired. The lead truck exploded, flames ripping through the night, illuminating the valley like a dying sun. Enemy shouts rose higher, sharper. The storm carried them, twisted them into echoes of anger and fear. Morgan shifted, fired again, and again, each shot carving seconds, each second another heartbeat for the men below. Her body shook, her vision blurred, but her finger never wavered. She thought of Art back at the cabin, of his question, "What are you running from?" And she realized the answer now. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing, bleeding, fighting, not for redemption, not for a name cleared. For them. For the ones who still believed survival mattered, even when it cost everything. How many heartbeats could stretch between life and death before time finally ran out? The ravine loomed ahead, a jagged crack in the mountainside, narrow and steep. To the SEALs, it wasn't just stone. It was salvation, a place where 20 men could hold off hundreds if only they could reach it. Peterson pushed them hard, his boots sinking deep in snow as he carried another wounded man over his shoulder. Clark covered the rear, firing short bursts, teeth bared against the cold. Palmer stumbled, half blind from exhaustion, but still refused to drop his rifle. They were ghosts of themselves now, silhouettes staggering through storm and fire. And still they moved. Morgan watched through her scope, every breath a struggle. She had lost count of how many she'd killed. The valley was littered with bodies, the snow stained black and red. But for every enemy that fell, more appeared. Trucks disgorged fresh fighters, disciplined, merciless, swarming toward the survivors like wolves. She whispered into her mic, voice raw. "SEAL 7, this is Viper. Ravine approach is hot. Heavy opposition waiting. I'll thin them out." "Copy," Peterson grunted. His voice cracked with fatigue, but iron still held at its core. "Do what you can, we'll get there." Morgan shifted, lined her scope on the mouth of the ravine. Enemy fighters crouched behind boulders, weapons braced, waiting to unleash death on the SEALs. She steadied her breathing, ignoring the pain screaming through her body. One shot. A rifleman collapsed. Another shot. A machine gunner folded backward, weapon slipping into snow. She fired again and again, her shoulder bruised raw, her vision swimming. Each kill was another second bought, another heartbeat stolen back. The SEALs surged, sprinting the last stretch. Rounds cut the snow around them, sparks dancing off rock. Mitchell fell, his legs giving out, but Porter dragged him up, refusing to let him go. Palmer screamed through clenched teeth as a bullet grazed his arm, But he kept firing, his pistol barking until the slide locked empty. "Move, damn it," Peterson shouted. "Don't stop, we're almost there." They crashed into the ravine, dragging the wounded, diving behind stone cover. For the first time in hours, they had walls to their backs, a defensible position, a chance, slim, fragile, but real. But the enemy didn't hesitate. They surged after them, howling through storm, firing from every angle. Rounds slammed into rock, echoing like thunder. The SEALs returned fire, every man pouring what little ammunition they had left into the charge. The ravine became a furnace of muzzle flashes and screams, stone splintering under the barrage. And above it all, Morgan kept firing. Her scope tracked a squad rushing the ravine mouth. She dropped 2, 3, but the fourth made it through. He leapt over the rocks, rifle raised, only to be tackled by Clark, who drove his knife home with brutal precision. Peterson fired until his rifle clicked empty, then drew his sidearm, firing point-blank at an enemy scrambling up the rocks. "You're not taking us," he snarled through gritted teeth. Palmer, bleeding and gasping, crawled to the edge of the ravine, pistol in one hand, a grenade in the other. He pulled the pin with his teeth, rolled it down the slope. The explosion shook the ground, scattering bodies in a cloud of fire and snow. For a heartbeat, silence, then another wave, always another wave. Morgan's chest heaved, her body trembling. She could barely reload, her hands numb, slick with blood. She had never fired this much, not even in the worst deserts of her career. Each shot was agony, but each shot mattered. She caught sight of another squad flanking high on the ridge, preparing to rain fire into the ravine. She steadied, fired, dropped the lead man. Another shot, another fell, but her vision blurred, her scope slipping. She shook her head, blinked blood from her eye. Focus, always focus. Her radio hissed, Peterson's voice ragged, almost breaking. "Viper, they're going to overrun us. We can't hold without you." Morgan pressed her cheek tighter to the scope. "You will hold. I'm not done yet." She fired again, and again, each round a promise. The storm screamed louder, snow whipping like knives. Her whole world shrank to the crosshairs, to the tiny slivers of time where life and death balanced. And then she heard it, the heavy grind of engines, more vehicles, armored this time. Her stomach dropped. She couldn't stop armor, not with the Barrett, not with anything she had left. She adjusted her scope, heart hammering. Through the blizzard she saw the silhouettes, 2 armored personnel carriers, bristling with mounted guns, crawling toward the ravine like predators. For the first time, fear clawed at her chest, not for herself, for them. If those vehicles reached the ravine, it was over. Her radio crackled, Westbrook's voice faint but urgent. "Morgan, satellite confirms armored reinforcements. Air support still 6 hours out. You're on your own." Her jaw clenched. "Copy," she whispered. She didn't scream, didn't curse. She just chambered another round. But she knew it wasn't enough. The APCs churned forward, engines roaring. The SEALs fired, bullets sparking harmlessly off steel. Peterson shouted orders, desperation in his voice. They were fighters, but even fighters broke against armor. Morgan's hands trembled as she loaded another mag. She aimed at the lead vehicle's driver slot, fired. The round pinged, deflected. Not enough. She fired again. Another spark, still moving. Her vision blurred with frustration, with helplessness. For the first time all night, her bullets didn't matter. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Art's voice came back to her, calm and knowing. Anger's useful fuel, but terrible navigation. This wasn't about anger. This was about choice, about what she was willing to give. She opened her eyes, chambered another round, whispered to herself, "If it costs me everything, so be it." Her scope steadied on the engine block. She fired, once, twice, again. The Barrett thundered, her shoulders screaming, and on the 4th shot the vehicle shuddered, smoke belching from the hood. It slowed, stalled. She exhaled hard, sweat freezing on her skin. One down. But the second kept coming. She shifted, aimed, fired again and again. Sparks, smoke, but it didn't stop. It kept crawling, its gun swiveling toward the ravine. Her radio crackled, Peterson's voice hoarse but fierce. "Viper, if you've got one more miracle, now's the time." She stared through her scope, heart pounding. One more miracle. She chambered her last round, pressed her cheek to the stock, ignored the blood in her eye, the scream in her muscles, breathed once, twice, and squeezed. What sound did a final bullet make when it decided the fate of 20 men? For Morgan, it was silence. The Barrett's recoil crushed into her bruised shoulder, her vision blurred from blood and exhaustion. For a breathless second, she thought she'd missed, that the last round she had left had vanished into snow, wasted, forgotten. Then the armored personnel carrier shuddered. Smoke belched from its engine block, flames licking out from the hood. The vehicle groaned to a halt, its mounted guns sagging as fire consumed the steel. Enemy fighters leapt from the back, scrambling into the storm in panic. The valley trembled with the explosion when its fuel tank caught, lighting the snow in a searing bloom of orange and red. Morgan slumped against stone, chest heaving, her body screaming with pain. That was her last round. The Barrett's chamber was empty, her pack was dry. But the ravine still stood, and the seals inside it were still alive. Her radio crackled, Peterson's voice breaking through the storm. "Viper, I don't know who the hell you are, but you just saved all of us." She wanted to answer, to say something sharp or quiet or maybe even grateful, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she pressed the transmit button, whispering, "Hold your ground, dawn's coming." She let go, let silence take the channel again. Because it wasn't about her, not tonight. The storm raged on. Enemy fire still cracked against the rocks, but it was scattered now, desperate, lacking the precision it once carried. Mansfield was gone. His lieutenants were disjointed, their momentum shattered. The SEALs fought with everything left. Peterson's pistol barked until it clicked empty, then he scavenged a fallen rifle and kept firing. Clark, bloodied and staggering, held the rear with the stubborn defiance of a man who refused to let his brothers fall alone. Palmer, pale and shaking, loaded his last grenade, his lips moving in a prayer no one heard. They were at the edge, beyond exhaustion, beyond fear, and yet something held them. The knowledge that in the darkness above, someone unseen had refused to abandon them. Morgan wiped blood from her eye, her vision swimming. She wasn't firing anymore. She couldn't, but she could still watch, still bear witness. She crawled to the lip of her perch, her body dragging like lead, and kept her scope trained on the ravine. If she couldn't kill for them anymore, she could at least see them through. The night dragged on, each minute a war in itself. The storm never relented, snow piling, wind screaming like ghosts. Bodies lay scattered across the valley, American, Russian, German, nameless mercenaries from half the world. The ground was littered with steel, blood soaking into white. And then finally, the sky began to change. A faint glow touched the horizon, soft and slow, bleeding light into the storm. Dawn. Enemy fire faltered. The fighters who had come so confidently into Devil's Backbone now stumbled, morale fracturing in the face of what they hadn't destroyed. Mansfield was dead, his forces gutted, his grand ambush broken by a ghost with a rifle. By sunrise, the valley fell quiet. The SEALs slumped against stone, their weapons limp in their hands. Peterson scanned them with weary eyes. They had lost brothers, too many, but they had survived. Against all reason, against all odds, they had survived. He pressed his radio, his voice hoarse. "Viper, it's over. We made it." There was no reply. High above, Morgan lay against the rock, her face pale, blood crusted along her temple. Her body trembled with every breath, exhaustion dragging her down like chains. She stared at the sky, the storm thinning, light breaking through clouds in streaks of gold. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. She thought of art, sipping coffee on her porch, asking her what she was running from. She thought of the tribunal that had branded her a disgrace, of the bullet that had ended her career. She thought of the silence she had carried all these years in exile. And then she thought of the men below, strangers who had lived, because she had chosen not to stay silent anymore. Her radio hissed faintly, Peterson's voice coming through again, softer now. "Whoever you are, thank you." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She didn't answer, she didn't need to. The mountains would carry the truth for her. Hours later, when extraction helicopters thundered over the valley, the SEALs stumbled into their shadows, broken but alive. They searched the ridges for their unseen savior but found nothing. Only spent casings in the snow. Only silence. Peterson paused before boarding, scanning the cliffs one last time. Somewhere up there, he knew, a ghost had watched over them. He saluted the empty ridge, then turned away. High above, hidden in the storm's dying breath, Morgan pulled her hood tighter, her rifle slung across her back once more. She moved silently, leaving no tracks, vanishing into the mountains that had become her exile and her refuge. She didn't stay to be thanked. She didn't stay to be known. Because this wasn't about redemption. It wasn't about erasing disgrace or proving anyone wrong. It was about dignity. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.